Plant-based chat day, woo! And I'm sitting down, which is very exciting for me. So maybe I'll fidget less. We'll see. Chances are 60% less fidgeting. It is hot. It is hot, hot, hot here in North Carolina. And I went out for a walk, and my 11-year-old hound pit bull was just like, after 15 minutes. So if it's hot where you guys are, I feel you. I want to know where you're watching from, what the weather's like, and I'm hearing in Europe it's crazy. So if any of my UK friends out there can check in and let me know you're doing okay. I worry because I think some of you guys don't have air conditioning, which is probably the most American thing I could say. Other than mispronouncing Worcestershire sauce, right? Today, I'm so lucky to have Victoria Moran with us. We met several years ago when she interviewed me on her podcast, and she is just like a beacon of light. I feel like she's really a kindred soul in that she approaches everything with such a kindness mindset, and I just really resonate with that. And I think you guys will as well. And she is just a very powerful woman too. Right before this, we were talking a little bit about me being an old person. See, I think it takes 10 years off me when I wear my silly t-shirts, and that may be true. Probably giggling helps too, right? Because I'm excited because it's not that long before I get to be a crone. We were talking about the different phases of life, and it's so magical to see someone really just paving this positive path in a business. So not only does she have amazing things to say and do and give you this presence, she's also created Main Street Vegan, which helps other vegans and plant-based people on their business journey as well. And so that's just magical in and of itself. So I'm going to be quiet and let Victoria introduce herself and tell you a little bit about how she came to be where she is.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. It's so much fun to be with you today. I just love listening to you, and you're so real, and you have that enviable kitchen behind you. I live in New York City, which is my choice, and I'm grateful to be here. But when it comes to kitchen size, we are deprived, most of us here in New York, so it's cool to get to see that great kitchen. So hi, everybody. What a pleasure to get to know Kathy's friends. So I'm Victoria Moran, as you know, and I've already told you where I live. I have been vegan since 1983, and I actually started
No way!
trying.
I became vegetarian in 1983.
Oh, wow, then we're kindred in more ways than we knew.
That's awesome. Sorry, no, I've never heard anyone else say 1983. So.
Yeah, it was a great year. So I'd actually started years before. I had discovered yoga in the late 1960s and eventually moved to London to go to school, and they actually had vegetarians there. And inspired by yoga, I did become a vegetarian. And I heard of veganism a couple of years later, and I immediately resonated with the ethical part, but it just seemed so difficult and so extreme in 1971 because there was nothing in terms of plant-based milk, tofu. I would not see tofu for the next 4 years, and when it finally showed up, it was in an Asian market where you had to dig it out of a pot of water with really long tongs.
And
so
can you imagine some of that now after, like when you think of some things that you used to do, and now it's like after COVID, I'm like, don't you blow out those candles on that birthday cake, right? And it's like reaching in to get tofu that in open containers and things. But we lived through it.
Yeah, and so it was tough, and I was also dealing with a binge eating disorder, and I would be vegan for a while, and then I would fall off the wagon. But what really helped was that two people, at least, and there may have been others, but I know of two people who would not give up on me, and they were the founders of the American Vegan Society, the late Jay Dinshaw, and his wife, the very much living Freya Dinshaw. And they just always treated me like a vegan. And it's almost like they held that vision until I could fit into it. And so I did ultimately become vegan. My daughter was an infant, and I was so thrilled that she was going to be vegan from the time she started eating food. She's still vegan. She works as an aerialist and a stunt performer.
Wow.
So that's all cool. And then I started writing books. So my first book was called Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic, and Exploration of Veganism. And that was actually a college thesis. I went to school late, and I got a fellowship to do foreign studies. So I got to go to the UK, where I know some of you guys are, to study vegans, because at that time, this was 1981, there were more vegans in the UK, plus the landmass was smaller, so it was easier to do the research, and they actually gave me money to go there and spend time and do this research, looking at vegans from a religious and spiritual perspective, because my major was comparative religions. So I wrote that paper just as a paper, and it was serialized in the American Vegan Society magazine. And somebody saw it in the UK, a wonderful man named John Wynne Tyson, who did some fabulous writing himself. And he acted as a literary agent and got me a publisher. So that was the first of my 13 books. And about half of them are on veganism, and the other half are on well-being and eclectic spirituality and just being a woman in the contemporary world and having a life of meaning. So in 2012, I wrote a book called Main Street Vegan, and that spawned everything I've done from then to now, which includes Main Street Vegan Academy, which Kathy talked about, and that trains and certifies vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. We've been doing that now for 10 years. We're having our 10th anniversary celebration this summer, and we're having our 34th cohort in October. So we're live on Zoom these days, and anybody can join from anywhere on earth, and you can find out all that mainstreetvegan.com. And then I also have a small production company. So we did a film called A Prayer for Compassion. Thomas Jackson is the filmmaker. That's about spirituality and food choices. And as Kathy mentioned, the podcast, I did 10 years, 475 episodes of the Main Street Vegan podcast. And then the network that it was on closed its doors. And so we're in a revamp period, and I'll be coming back very soon, probably by the 1st of August, with the Victoria Moran podcast, Meetings with Remarkable Women. So really looking forward to that. And if you look up the Victoria Moran podcast, you'll find all those Main Street Vegan episodes archived as well.
I love that. And I love the story of you looking for more whole food, vegan, non-animal product foods in the 70s and 80s. Because I talk about... You know, because I lived in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where there wasn't an Asian market. There was an Asian restaurant, right? So, I mean, it's so much different than now. Then it's crazy. But, do you remember, were you in New York then as well?
No. I was, when I went vegan, I was living in Wheaton, Illinois. My first husband was in chiropractic school, so it's a suburb of Chicago. And then I moved back to my hometown of Kansas City a couple of years later.
And those are not easy places.
No.
And they
are now. Exactly. You know, now it's amazing.
Well, now pretty much you can, what I love, okay, I was about to say there's so many Whole Foods and Sprouts and different things like that, but you know where the hidden awesome place is Walmart. And I'll tell you, And I'm not trying to tell you not to go to your local co-ops or international markets or anything like that, but I know some of my people are literally in the middle of nowhere, and that Walmart is the only game in town. So Walmart seems to go where where one else is willing to venture as far as supermarkets and things. But you can get tofu, you can get soy milk, almond milk. They have a lot of gluten-free vegan stuff too. And in fact, there's one bread I get there that I can't get anywhere else, not at Sprouts, not at the co-ops, not at Whole Foods. And so it's kind of exciting for me. I know a lot of people don't want to support Walmart and what they're doing, and I respect that completely. However, if I lived in the boonies and it's the only game in town, I'm also going to be shopping there. So
absolutely,
we have to leave room because I'm super privileged as far as shopping options in Durham, North Carolina. We live maybe 10 minutes from probably 4 or 5 different grocery stores. And for the ones I like, we're maybe 20 minutes away. And Sprouts, Trader Joe's, Aldi's, I can even go out and go to Lidl's. And all, I mean, it's like a plethora. Plus we have almost an area in Morrisville that's almost like a little India. So I probably have access to half a dozen to a dozen Indian markets.
Oh, those are wonderful. Just the smell.
And it's just such the best place to go and buy things. So like a lot of times when I'm talking about things, like I say, don't go to your local grocery store and buy cinnamon or spices, right? Because they mark them up 1,000%. So even at my cheapest level grocery store is probably Food Lion commercially here. I know it's different regionally. And Harris Teeter is more on the top. Wegmans, I think, is more across the United States. And Wegmans prices are actually, some of them are pretty good. But if you order off of Amazon, go to like Penzeys or Savory Spice, those are better options than going to the grocery store and buying them. They're going to be fresher. If you have an Indian market or you order Indian spices online from Amazon, you get like a pound of cinnamon for what it would cost for a little jar. And not everyone is in a financial position to do that, right? And again, I'm very privileged in that, and I'm very aware. But you can go to a co-op or a Sprouts or somewhere that has bulk herbs. And when I was back in the day, when I played in the Louisiana Philharmonic, and on the summers we'd be in unemployment, so I got like $50 a week on good unemployment weeks. So I understand not having everything. I could get a teaspoon of the spice I needed because it's by the pound and it's bulk spices, so you really can do stuff like that. So what I love is how accessible things are now. Whereas, you know, as soon as there were co-ops, I think things got more accessible. I don't know how you feel about that with the process of things.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting. Early on, there were old-fashioned health food stores. And I remember the first day I walked into a health food store, it was 1969, and I picked up a can of fake meat because it pretty much all came in cans in those days. None of it was vegan, but I'd never heard of vegan, so that didn't matter. But when I picked up this can, there was this circle of where the dust was around the can. It's like, wow, nobody's picked this up in a really long time. But those little health food stores, and there's still some left, we still have some here in New York City, certainly, they were so fascinating because they were always run by these incredible, eccentric people who were so far ahead of their time, and they were just such free thinkers. I think about, for example, Dick Gregory's mentor. Dick Gregory, if you haven't heard of him, was a very famous comedian in the 1960s, and he was also very obese. And there was a woman on the south side of Chicago with her little market called Alvinia Whole Foods. Her name was Dr. Alvinia Fulton. She was a naturopath. And she just set the intention. One day, Dick Gregory is going to walk past my store, and then I'm going to be ready for it. And lo and behold, one day he walked past her store, and she kind of got him in. I always think of the vaudevillian, with the cane. and she got him in. And he was very big in the civil rights movement. And so she tied together, rights and justice and reverence for the lives of everybody, including animals. So she got him in on the vegan thing, and also, with a lot of juicing and fresh fruits and vegetables and herbs and things like that, completely transformed him. And he, of course, became a major voice in the vegan movement in the 1970s and 80s, and really until he died, I think it was 3 years ago, in his late 80s. But these little health food stores were great. And then we started, and tell me if you ran into this phenomenon. We called them co-ops, but they weren't storefronts. They were like buying clubs where people would get together and buy the stuff that you would find in a health food store, but at wholesale prices. And then we'd get together at somebody's house. We called it split out day, and we'd divide everything up.
That still exists now, though I'm not doing it. I've been told about 2 different ones. My friend Marilyn is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and she does that. And you might know Helene Greenberg, who does the Veg Fest. She does Triangle Veg Fest. I think she does some. Yeah. She does a lot of Veg Fest now. And she lives in Raleigh, so she's my local Veg Fest. And she's involved in one, and I keep toying with going back in there. Did you ever see one like in 1980s, early 80s? In North Carolina, at least, people would have them in their houses. It would be like a little room that would be kind of like a store. And I would get so excited. I remember going and seeing like the cool cruelty-free shampoos. I remember I was very enamored with that. And it was a whole different world. And co-ops are kind of magical. I think in a way now they're grown and they're so clean and nice and tidy and helpful. You don't necessarily see all that history. And I remember in the 80s, I started volunteering at a co-op so I could get a percentage off. Like and I think that's still in most co-ops now. So you can get a 15 or 20% discount, which is significant on groceries. And it was then too. And when I was going to grad school, I literally had this giant box. It was probably taller than me. I'm 5'1". It was like some kind of big giant box full of like nuts and grains and beans and things that I kind of collected from being at the co-op. And I lived off that stuff for like a year. But it was never clean. It was always a little bit dirty. And it's because they were all volunteers, so people are like bagging up stuff and checking out. And it wasn't like now the co-ops have employees like that do everything. And I actually, was it last year or the year before, Cheryl and I were driving to go see some Christmas lights. And I grew up in Winston-Salem, which is about an hour and a half from Durham. And I saw on Happy Cow that there was a little place like we could get vegan sandwiches. So we went, and I went to the bathroom, and I'm like, this feels like I've been here before. And then I'm like, as we're going, I'm like, it looks like there's a little co-op shelf. And I'm like, are you guys a co-op? Oh, we've been a co-op since the 80s. And I was like, oh, you're the co-op that I used to come and work in. It's so much nicer. It's like got a proper coffee shop restaurant feel to it. But it even now talking about it gives me cold chills, because like being there, and I think this is one thing now we in the 80s, there was not online anything. So it was very hard to connect with other like-minded people. In the 90s, when I moved to New York, I lived in Brooklyn for a couple of years. And so it was very easy to meet people there because, I was worried that there wouldn't be a lot of holistic granola, vegetarian food, and I was so wrong. Because there's just so many people. You're going to have a concentration of whatever you're interested in. But like trying to connect when maybe there's 5 of you in a town. And so like things like Vegetarian Times was like a big deal to see what products happened or going to your co-op, and then all of a sudden you're meeting a group of people who are like, yeah, we don't want to eat animals either. And it's just kind of, I don't know, it was just very satisfying.
It was, and it's interesting that it worked. I think whenever you're living in a time, it's the most modern time there is. And so you're never sitting there thinking, gosh, things are going to get a lot better in 20 years. But when I lived in a very small town in the central Missouri Ozarks, within 2 weeks, I think it was exactly 14 days, everybody in 100 miles who was at all alternative, so all of the vegetarians, all of the people who did yoga, all of the people who meditated, whatever it was that just wasn't quite standard for a town in the central Missouri Ozarks, they knew I was there and they called me or they showed up on my doorstep. And I am friends with a lot of those people to this day. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting, now we have the World Wide Web, but before, I think we had the local people know people web. And the word gets out.
It's very true. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting to see how things have changed over the years. And I'm very grateful for how easy it is to kind of get to know people and for me as a recipe developer to kind of help people wherever they are. Like the fact that CJ from the UK is helping me test my Ninja Creamy ebook, right? Isn't that crazy? I mean, it's just so magical that we all get to kind of meet, and I think it's a lot like that old time in that we still find each other. And I feel like video, which is funny because I did not want to do video when it started. I was kicking and screaming, but I've been doing it so long, it really, hopefully all of you guys watching now feel like you're in my kitchen with me and Victoria hanging out, right? And that's something that was hard to do. Well, actually, you were in somebody's house hanging out. Maybe that, once you weren't doing that, then it feels a little bit strange. But we get to be able to really touch people where they are. And it also makes it so much more accessible. Again, like with COVID, with maybe people who aren't able to get out of their houses as much, it just allows them to have all of this come to them. And I think that's super awesome. And it's super awesome.
It's like we used to do Main Street Vegan Academy in person. And we did it in my apartment. And it's so funny how life works out. When we got this apartment in 2008, and we were so happy to be here and all that, but I would always complain about this extra kind of space when you walk in. It's like if we didn't have this big space here, we could have more closets, we could have bigger bedrooms, blah, 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 complain about that extra space. But once Main Street Vegan Academy started, that extra space meant another 12 chairs for people to come and take the course. And so that was great for as long as it was, and people came here and got their wonderful New York experience. But now that we're on Zoom, tuition is half, and people don't have to make a trip, and they can join us from wherever they are. We had this amazing man in the last class, Kenneth Odhiambo, and he lives in Sandu, Kenya. And when he was corresponding with me about taking the course, he said, now the only problem is there's no Wi-Fi in my town. So we worked it out so that he could go to a bigger town on the weekends and do the course there. And even with the time difference, a lot of people in other countries will listen to half the classes on the recordings. He stayed up till 4 a.m. or whatever time it was in Kenya, middle of the night, to do this thing. So it is true. There are things we can do now that we just couldn't do before. And then I think, in addition, we have to still honor the 3-dimension. It's like it's so easy to order stuff online. But when I walk around New York City and I see all of these empty storefronts because of the pandemic and everybody got used to buying everything online, and I see that the only things that have lasted are restaurants, coffee shops, and banks. And now all these CBD kind of places. But I just want to be able sometimes to shop, sometimes to just interact with people. There's this wonderful little store on Broadway called the Town Shop. It's lingerie and swimwear. It's been around since the 1920s, I think the late 20s. And it's so lovely because they have actual people working there who want to be helpful. And the other day it was like, I need socks. I desperately need socks. Where did all my socks go? I need to get on and order socks. And it's like, no, you go to the Town Shop and buy your socks. Because, Gandhi said we want to be the change that we want to see. And I guess that can also be the change that you don't want to have happen. If you like the way things are, support it. Because, we're all here for one another.
I love that. And actually yesterday I did an impromptu video unbagging, I think I called it, because I've just discovered a super old fruit and vegetable stand here in Durham called Perkins Orchard. So years ago, the owner now, his grandfather started it. There's literally a house. It's kind of in a neighborhood. So it had just been one of those outside the house, I have a garden things. Well, now it was probably an acre back there. There's a big shop. There's an air-conditioned area, like all these different things, and you can get a peck bag. I'm not good at explaining because I honestly don't know how big a peck is. Maybe you do. But these bags
think of it as how much you love somebody, a bushel and a peck.
Yeah, right. That's all I know. And so one of these bags is $20. You can fill it up, and they say if it grows, it goes. So I got oyster mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, avocados, plums, peaches. I also, when you buy that bag for $20, it was this whole counter full of stuff. You get a free whatever, and it was a whole cantaloupe and cilantro.
Ooh.
And it's not organic, and it's not all super locally grown. He works with farmers over 12 states, so it's still like peaches don't grow in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. So he gets them from South Carolina. He's still not going from Portugal or South America or something like that. And I love that it's a locally owned business. It's a Black-owned business, and it's an old family business. And when you walk down there, and it really is like a whole open room with like a wall and stuff. The first thing someone's going to say to you is, have you been here before? They give you a tour. They talk to you about all the different things, where the peaches are. They can help you pick out fruit and vegetables that you're not used to picking out. And they carry things to your car. They're just like, it's this warm, wonderful feeling of being part of a community and supporting a local business. So kind of like what you're saying, because I've been getting a CSA, but before, during the pandemic, I was going through things like Misfit Market or Hungry Harvest. And I feel like at least Misfit Market, which I did a lot of videos about, started not being quality anymore.
Well, that was my experience. Maybe they're different in different parts of the country. But yeah, and it's such an interesting balance. You want to support the people that you believe in how they're doing things, but you also need the quality because you're valuable too. And usually the local people are the ones who value quality as much as their customers.
Yeah, and I really do suggest like farmers markets and local things and local farmers whenever you can. And the Durham Farmers Market in specific has some organic. It has a lot of no pesticide. And if you guys go to a farmers market, I'm not sure if this happens as much as in New York. It's very expensive to get an organic certification, and it takes a lot of paperwork. And so here, a lot of the smaller farmers took over old tobacco farms and reconditioned the land. So they're not big commercial farmers and things. So things, to make that organic certification can take years. And I'm okay. I'm not saying anybody out there should be okay. You should pick what you want to do. If you only want to eat organic, then I support you in that. For me, it's important for me to support these local people too. So that's my choice. And I can understand different choices, but I think the closer we come to where our food comes from, there's something magical about that. What do you think, Victoria?
Well, I do think that. I mean, I'm not 100% with that, because I've also been doing some interesting reading that one of the reasons that life expectancy has extended and things like that is that we are able to get foods from other places, because it's always spring, summer, or fall somewhere. And that in the olden times, at least in the European history, it was the royalty that got the oranges, that got the papayas and these kinds of things that the other people didn't get, and they had that incredible advantage. And now most of us can have that. So I'm not, oh, absolutely, I cannot eat that. That came from Florida.
Right.
But
Yeah.
on the other hand, when you can get something that's fresh, just freshly picked, it's so exciting. And I'm very happy to do pesticide free, because to me, that's what organic is about. I know it has there's a lot more to it in terms of the getting the certification and all that. But for me as a consumer, that is not as important as I want to get this produce and I want to be able to also pay my mortgage. And it's really here at some of the farmers markets, it almost is like that. Well, so so we have to just.
I totally get it. So like at a farmer's market, I gotten like this, like a handful of oyster mushrooms, and it was about $24. I was able to get about the same amount and put on top of my bag. They sat right there. And so some things I buy from the farmer's market and some things I don't. I look at my budget and see, because I think that's super important. What I think is so interesting about Perkins Orchard too, since it's not just from Durham, it's not just from, do they get their apples from the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina? Yes, but they get their oranges from Florida, their peaches from South Carolina. But I think they're trying to stay less traveled whenever possible. I got mangoes there. I don't know where they came from. I didn't ask. But they were like, I got 2 Alfonso mangoes in that bag too.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, that just sounds like a heavenly place to go. That should be on the tour bus routes.
I know. And it's just so funny that I kind of missed that. And I think there's a lot of little places now that we miss in our own like backyards. And that's why yesterday I wanted to talk about that, to have other people look and maybe to mention about things like that where they live, so other people can know about them. But I agree with you. I think it's a priority. Maybe this is the better way to put it. It's a priority to eat the rainbow, to have a lot of different kinds of foods. And I would never shame someone for eating, I don't even know where things come from, something from some other country. I hesitate to step in that mess that I'm about to make. I would think maybe we get grapes from Argentina just because there's wine, but I'm guessing. If that's the grapes and I needed to eat them, then that's where I would have them from. And you have to make your health a priority, but it's also important to then look at these other things. Kind of like what Misfit Market I was excited about, because they were taking things that were just going to be thrown away. But what I found is the produce wasn't really very misfit, but it was not always being handled properly after that. And for 2020 and 2021, I got exquisite food from them. Exquisite. I maybe had to have return or get a credit for 1 or 2 things, but then end of 2021, it was just, if I ordered strawberries, they were going to be a mush. If I ordered this, they were going to be a mush. So I'm not really recommending it anymore. But again, Walmart's not the best place for produce, but you know what? A lot of times they will get local stuff too. Aldi's is a good inexpensive place. Do you guys have Aldi's in the city?
No, but I remember when I was living in Wheaton, Illinois, back in the day. Yeah, we go to Aldi's. I think they've evolved a lot now because at that time it was all packaged stuff. I don't even think they had a refrigerator section. But it was, gosh, such good buys. I mean, I can remember buying like cans of beans by the case. And then they were really cheap. And it's interesting talking about the cost of food because it's just my husband and I at this point, and our rescue dog and our rescue pigeon. And so for a while there, I just wasn't looking at what the food cost. It's like, get it, it's an investment in your health, don't worry about it. But now the prices on everything have gone up so markedly that it's really becoming, okay, I don't want to do something stupid here. And so how do you get, for example, berries? That we're told if you eat a cup of blueberries a day, you will stave off Alzheimer's, even if you have the gene for Alzheimer's. Well, that seems like a smart thing to do. And, so I discovered the frozen wild blueberries. And the wild ones are even higher in antioxidants than the regular. And, so what if they're frozen? They make a creamier smoothie that way. So we just find these little things and then make it a celebration. I mean, one thing I learned a long time ago is when you need to save money, pretend like it's a game and not like a necessity.
I like that. I like that a lot because I always have staples recipes because I always kind of feel like in different parts of your life, you're in different situations. One, you have more time than money. One, that you have more money than time. And you can go and buy these things and it's not a problem. Or maybe you can't find one that fits your special diet or allergy. But I feel like we went to Sprouts yesterday as well. And so I love to go to Sprouts every once in a while, especially manager specials. Ooh! And I wanted to get some probiotics, so I got those little vegan Bio-K bottles. Well, because they're going up, they're usually like $4 or $6 each, something like that, 99 cents. I got my little course. Oh, yeah.
Wow, when you can buy anything for cents.
Right?
That's really cool.
And Sprouts in particular, I found a couple of different things. So I got 5 pounds of fresh blueberries for $10. So I got 2 of them. And I actually dried and dehydrated some of those. And then I froze the rest. And here we have blueberry farms. So you can go blueberry pick. It was less per pound than if I had gone and picked them. And a couple of weeks later, they had a sale on blackberries. So I got 2 big things of blackberries for less than half price and froze some of those. So while we're in the season of bounty, if there's stuff that you want, now's a good time to freeze it yourself if you can make it less expensive. But and Apple has a good point, Apple from Vancouver. Frozen fruit often has more nutrients because it's flash frozen on harvest rather than sitting around for a time. So Victoria's blueberries have more nutrients than mine, but I'm not sad.
Oh, no. And there's nothing like having something fresh.
Well,
Wonderful, especially if you're going to do something with them. Like I love the frozen blueberries in smoothies, but I have thawed them at times and made cobbler. That's kind of my go-to dessert because I'm not a good cook, especially I'm not a good baker, but I can make a crisp. Anybody can make a crisp. And so I have this wonderful recipe from a book called The Peaceful Palate, Jennifer Raymond, one of my earliest vegan cookbooks, and it's cranberries and blueberries and apples. I mean, it's really, really good, but it doesn't work as well with the frozen blueberries. They just seem to keep exuding liquid in ways that the fresh ones don't. So there's something good for everything. There's always a way to make it a happy maker.
And there's always ways to fix things up too. So you could always cook those frozen blueberries with maybe a little bit of ground chia seed if you didn't want to use cornstarch or sugar. and cook it and then put your topping on it too, just for people to, I'm always queen of like, how can I make this work? And I try to figure out a way, but I feel like, and food is getting so expensive though, like especially prepared stuff. It's not that produce and fruit isn't getting a little expensive, but like vegan yogurt is going up. You know, a lot of vegan cheeses are going up. And I'm not saying don't get them. I am saying look for those sales. You know, I bought something full price yesterday because it was vegan blue cheese made with cashews from a company I've never seen before. Ooh. And I spent that $10 so fast my head spun around as I was being cheap about something else. So I think sometimes it's interesting to balance that. But I'm finding like one of the reasons I like the Ninja Creamy and making all those ice creams and things is that vegan ice cream can be $8 a pint.
And it often has ingredients in it that I would rather not have. Canola oil, for instance, just kind of creeps me out. I know some people like it and it has a good omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and that's all fine. You know, it's kind of like microwaves. I don't really have a lot of data on why they just make me feel kind of like, ooh, I don't want to eat that, but they do. And so, yeah, to make your own ice cream. And again, you know, talking about the olden days, it used to always be frozen bananas through a champion juicer or, you know, a food processor later when I got a food processor. And, you know, it still works.
It absolutely does. And so, like, everybody's been hearing me talk about Ninja Creamy because I'm doing... Chef AJ helped me name this. It's the ultimate Ninja Creamy experience with Kathy Hester.
Yay!
So I feel like a publisher named my book because it's always like something like that. But like there's an ebook portion and there's videos and I'm going to do some live classes. But even with those recipes, you can freeze them in ice cube trays and use like a food processor or blender. It's just you're going to probably have to use a little more milk. And I was talking with Chef AJ recently and I didn't know this. She told me the champion juicer, I guess, is not going to be anymore.
Aww.
And so she was looking for another way to make stuff because that's how she's always made hers. And found we're friends, but she found my video on using the Ninja Creamy, which was kind of funny. And so I actually sat with her last week and we made some stuff together because she doesn't like to read manuals. That's not her. And I have a tech background, so I like to know all the things, and I've done tech writing and web development, so I'm used to explaining things very clearly. And she thought it was just as smooth as the Champion Juicer. I've never tried the Champion Juicer.
It's like Dairy Queen, and that was always a big weakness for me back when I ate dairy. In fact, I remember I was taking some community college classes in my early 20s, and they put in a soft serve machine in the cafeteria, and I came home and cried. And it's like, do I have to drop out because I'm going to have soft serve every day that I go to school? Like, I cannot help myself. So all that to say, I really like it. And the frozen banana would come out of that champion juicer. You know, just you could do swirls and all that stuff. So, but, you know, there's a time for everything. Now we have Ninja Creamy.
It's true. And I know a lot of people use the Yonana. Did you ever use the Yonana?
No.
I don't like cleaning it. Like probably, if you're making a single serving, you end up with a quarter cup in the machine that you kind of have to scrape out. And maybe I'm just picky and lazy, but you can find things like food processors, Ninja Creamies, and Cuisinart ice cream makers at your thrift store, speaking of being kind of saving.
Yeah, because people get tired of cleaning them.
Yes.
Juicers too. They're just such a great way to try out different kinds. So if maybe you want to get a new one later, you know whether you like that particular model, if it was easy to clean, or if it was easy to put back together. I got a new juicer recently, and you know, I kind of regret it because I have to look at a piece of paper to put it back together. You know, it's just too too many details, because you come from tech and I come from art and literature. And so
I come from both, so like I can do one thing or the other. So I was a professional musician too. So I can't have both parts of those brains. And like I can't recipe develop and write detailed things. They have to be separate times. But I do think that a lot of things are getting more complicated, and I do really enjoy breaking it down for other people. Like when I first got the Ninja Creamy, I'm like, what the heck is this? How am I supposed to do this? You look at the instructions and there's conflicting information. And so I think we all feel that way too, you know? And I got my super like expensive Yonana, I think I got at the thrift store for $8.
oh,
I paid more for the
too
not
bad
nice
you
one.
couldn't have gotten it for $7.
I need a good New York negotiator.
Yeah.
I love going thrifting with my agent, Lisa Eckes, because she loves to negotiate. She loves thrifting just like I do. So when I go and visit her, it is the most fun for me possible, because I don't like to negotiate, but I like to get the best price.
No.
Yeah, I'm like, here, have another $1. It was a really nice thing, you know. I tend to do that. I've been looking at new food processors because I have my Cuisinart is a workhorse, but I got it like over 10 years ago. It has all that weather stripping up in the top, you know, that makes it impossible to clean and makes me angry. And I don't get angry about a lot of things. So whenever I pull out the food processor, everybody's like, ooh, this must be an amazing recipe when I'm teaching. And so I found 2 on Prime Day. One I'm going to be trying, and it's a new Cuisinart. The base is super light, which makes me nervous, but it has one of those dicing kits like the Breville. And then I think tomorrow, because have you ever gotten anything off of Amazon Warehouse?
No.
Oh. Okay. Everybody knows I talk about, so like if you're on the Amazon site on your computer, where the search is, if you click down, there's Amazon Warehouse. So it's returns. Sometimes there'll be refurbished stuff, but let's say a lot of the times they'll tell you what's wrong with it. So a lot of times they'll be dented box in original packaging, dented box, new packaging, or I found a Breville food processor, and there was also the Prime Day extra 25% off, so it was like $230 instead of $500, and it's supposed to have a cosmetic damage, so and I can return it immediately if it doesn't work out. But I'm going to see, hopefully later this week, I'm going to put the 3 food processors side by side and see what works best.
Oh, that's going to be fun. Will that be a show that you do?
Probably.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
So, but yeah, I'm always kind of looking, like, I just got mad and gave up on food processors because of this. The old ones used to be so great, so easy to clean. What kind do you have?
I have Cuisinart, and it's probably a little newer than your 10-year-old one. It's probably, I don't know, 5 years old, and it works fine.
Does it have that stuff in the top? See, okay. So I must have gotten this because we had gotten a KitchenAid one. I returned it, and the Cuisinart lid was better to clean than the KitchenAid lid was. But they must have heard enough people complain.
Yeah, no, mine came with a note. It said, because of Kathy Hester, this is a good model.
I'm fighting the good fight for everyone.
You are.
Just like you are. Now, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of your eating and then becoming vegan? Was that around the same time, or?
Yeah, I became vegan. I evolved into it in a way, but in another way, I did get into recovery for my binge eating problem. So I finally could choose what I wanted to eat. When I told that story about the soft serve, I mean, it was really like I was a prisoner to these like urges for what I had to eat. And so through this 12-step program, that was lifted, and I could make choices about what I ate. And once I had the choice, I had to choose compassion. I mean, it was just like I couldn't live with myself if I didn't choose compassion. So that was really what started it way back when. And I always have eaten, pretty healthy. Of course, back then, unless you wanted to eat, I don't know, potato chips and Coca-Cola, there was not a lot that would be considered unhealthy that was vegan. So, we're getting along and doing our thing, and fast forward to now. I'm eating very simply because I'm at that time of life where I've just done a lot of cooking, and I just am not that excited about it anymore. So my little slow cooker for two is just my best friend. And there's a really good cookbook about that too. And so very, very often I'll do khichdi in the slow cooker. And khichdi is this very soothing Indian recipe in the Ayurvedic tradition. When somebody is sick, they will put them on a khichdi cleanse. And I don't even like that word cleanse because it always makes me think that I have to just drink a lot of liquids and be hungry. But in the Ayurvedic way of doing it, they'll say just in the morning, have some lovely stewed apples. And then for your other meals, have this khichdi, which is this wonderful, comforting soup or stew or porridge. Kind of depends on how long you leave it in the slow cooker. And yesterday I made some with split mung beans, and brown rice and sweet potatoes. And then you put these wonderful Indian seasonings in there. So cumin, cardamom, coriander, ginger, mustard seeds. I mean, it's just all those spices that make the Indian shops smell so good, but you can, make them smell good in your own kitchen. So I do a lot of that, some salads, of course, now, summertime. And it's just simple. And breakfast, very often, I make this Ayurvedic chocolate shake that I've told you about. That's kind of my go-to for breakfast when the bananas are at the right stage of ripeness. And it's just basically this wonderful creamy shake with the bananas and dates. And then you put some of those same spices in there, but more of what I think of as the Christmas cookie spices. So cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, that kind of thing. And clove, a little bit of cloves. You never want to overdo cloves, but it has so much antioxidant. And I drink that. And whether I make it chocolate or whether I make it carob, I'll go back and forth. I just feel like I could leap tall buildings in a single bound. Plus, it's easy and I don't have to think about it unless the bananas are being annoying, and then I have to think. What else is good? That's kind of it. We do really, really simple. Like I said, I'm a terrible baker. But I often take my dog to this wonderful new place on the Upper West Side called the Black Lab Cafe, which is a coffee shop for dogs. And that's 2 blocks from a wonderful vegan restaurant, Peace Food Cafe. And every day they have a different gluten-free vegan muffin. And so I will sometimes go there and I'll just pick up a couple of those muffins and go home and make a really easy soup. If we did the khichdi for lunch, I'll just have pea soup or a gazpacho or something, and then we have our muffin, and it's enough for dinner. And like you talked about stage of life, when we had kids at home, it was a very different thing. But now we can just do what we want to do, and we usually want muffins.
I can relate to that. And just 2 tips for everybody who's talking about making the khichdi. My friend Anu, who was on the show a long time ago. I've only been doing this a few months. I don't know. It seems like a long time ago. At Simmer to Slimmer, She has a vegan recipe for it, and it's delicious. It's actually, she let me put it in my cookbook, Gluten-Free Vegan Cooking in Your Instant Pot. And the only difference probably from her recipe on her blog and in my book, and this is something I do if you eat oil-free, a lot of times people really worry, but it's kind of the same thing when you're slow cooking Indian food as well, because you're not really putting oil in and sauteing a whole bunch of things. But if you toast those whole spices, or even just lightly saute dry any of the like ground cumin, ground coriander, things like that, that activates those spices and opens them up even without the oil. So just a tip. But it's delicious. I love that, and I love congee. I remember discovering congee when I lived in New Orleans, because there's a large Vietnamese population there, so there's a lot of Vietnamese restaurants. And at first, because I'm not a texture eater, so my wife, Cheryl, she's like, the texture's weird, and my best friend is a texture eater. These people kill me. But that was the first time I was like, this is an unfamiliar texture to have something so soft and so savory. But I am ultimately a flavor eater. So I can get off over almost anything as long as it tastes really delicious. And like the idea of having the fresh sliced jalapenos to make it just as hot as you wanted, or cilantro, basil, all those things put in, and then just let it warm a little, or like pho, that, you know, oh, it's beautiful. And kachari, and I can't even say how much I love Indian food, because I could literally eat it 3 meals a day from now till the end.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's just so comforting and satisfying. And people talk about things like the umami flavor and how that's so enticing, and I get that, but I wonder what the word is for just that comforting sense of certain foods and almost any food from certain cooks. So a lot of people have been posting lately about Uptown Juice Bar, which is here in Harlem where I live, and it's been around, I think, since the 1970s, and now they've opened a new place in Brooklyn, so it's getting some attention. But to me, it's like this temple of comfort. And you go there, and it's like a cafeteria, and you pick, you know, what things you want in your bowl. And it's just, so it's kind of soul food, but it's just food. It's like what my grandmother would have cooked. So there's potatoes and sweet potatoes, and they make this homemade thing they call it a chicken leg, but it's not faux anything. It's just real food shaped like that with a cardboard sticker, I don't know what you'd call it, so you can pick it up and eat it like a drumstick, and lots of greens and different kinds of vegetables. But there's just something about it that I sit there and eat it, or I bring it home and eat it, and I feel like not just I have been nourished and this was pleasant, but like all is right with the world. Mm-hmm. I had that experience also in a place in Sedona, Arizona called Chocola Tree, and I didn't even know that it was a Whole Foods kind of place. And I went in, and I'm one of the few people on earth that is very uncomfortable in Sedona. I think Sedona doesn't like me. And every time I've gone there, I've had all sorts of things go wrong. So I was just all kind of nervous. And I go into this place, and they bring me this bowl of soup, and I took one spoonful and thought, this must be illegal. I mean, there's no way you can get that kind of from a spoonful of soup without something funky in there. But it was just food, and food prepared with love and care. So it's all magical stuff, all this food stuff you do. It's incredible.
And I love you talking about this, because I feel like that a lot of times. Like, I really miss, my friend Kalpana had curry leaves in Morrisville, North Carolina. And this was before I was doing right when I started doing my cookbook stuff. So I ate there I was a web developer at Cotton Incorporated, and I ate there every day. And she would we'd talk about foods and things like that as well. And in the Great Vegan Bean book, there are 2 of her recipes she let me put in there. But I got to explore things, and then the more I ate there, the more I realized there were certain things that just brought me comfort. And it's hard because being gluten-free, 2 of the things I can't have, like I love a samosa chaat. Little spicy potato pea pastries covered in like a chickpea curry with like tamarind sauce and cilantro or mint chutney and some fresh onions. It's just like, when I think back to my sad growing up, I grew up in North Carolina, so there was a lot of meat, not a lot of vegetables, a lot of canned vegetables and things like that, because I'm a child that grew up in the 70s, right? So that was when everything was supposed to be instant. And so mashed potatoes were great, or certain things, but that felt more like this nourishing, magical. It is a carb fest too, and it's delicious. And I've made some samosas myself, which, gluten-free is gluten-free. And it is the way it is. But also another thing that was awesome was a Rava Dosa. So I got exposed to South Indian cuisine there, so I ate a lot of dosas and uttappams and things like that, which are like lentil rice crepes or lentil rice pancakes with fillings. Mm-hmm. And a Rava Dosa is wheat dosa. And so it's made with semolina, but it when they put it on, it's like lacy and crunchy, and it has potatoes in it. And what I love about dosas too is a friend of mine got one and was like, well, it's kind of plain. You've got all the dipping sauces. Make it how you want. So she wanted it to somehow be magically flavorful from the beginning. But it's all the sauces. It's coconut chutney and spicy tomato chutney and gunpowder and all these different magical things. And so I do think sometimes it's a sense of place too, like you were at the right place eating the right thing at the right time, and all was right with the world. Somehow, and it could be that I've felt that way in different places, and it is so magical.
I had someone say to me, 25 years ago, you have to find places where you recognize yourself. Oh. And I actually adopted that as one of my little chapters in the biggest selling book I've ever had, Creating a Charmed Life. And that just meant so much to me, because immediately when somebody says places where you recognize yourself, and you know what that is. And it's not the selfish thing of like, well, I'll never go to a place you like. I have to only go places I like. But you just have to have maybe daily, hopefully daily, or at least several times a week to touch base with whether it's a place, whether it's like a special place, your secret garden or whatever, or a kind of food or a kind of tea or a podcast or a piece of music, that it's not just good objectively, but it's yours. It just, it resonates the way you resonate. And so, I think that's really important. And when I hear you talking about the Indian food, it's like, I realize you are not Indian, but you still recognize yourself in those dosas.
It's very cool. True. And it's kind of funny because I've made a lot of Indian food blogger friends along the way too, because A, I'm always looking for a good recipe, and B, they're always shocked. Like my friend Anu, we met in a small blogger conference, and so I went and talked to her to meet her, and I just put an uttappam in my book, and she's like, you know what an uttappam is? And I'm like, yeah. And so when people see my excitement for it, and I think this goes all the way in everything. When you're being respectful and you just really like something that's in someone's culture, they are very likely to help you and share their knowledge and help you grow in that. I have another friend who does a lot of Hispanic food and like Latin American food. And because I'm 57, I don't know why her name just slipped me. She lives here. She's amazing. She's in the Smithsonian. I'm so lucky to get to know her. But when I was doing tamales, we went over and she helped me tweak that recipe. And I had a hot sauce and I'm like, look, this is not a traditional hot sauce, but I would love to have your feedback on it. And I still can't believe this. It sounds like I'm being braggy, but I was really expecting her to tweak it 17,000 ways because it's a margarita hot sauce. And she was like, oh, this is really good just the way it is. Did you bring more? And every time I go to her house, I bring her a batch. And it makes my heart sing. But she sees it as, I love these flavors and I want to share them with other people. And that's part of me recipe developing. I'm not trying to dumb down everything, but if someone who lives where there's only a Walmart knows that they can make their own dosas really easily, isn't that a great way for us all to be just a little closer together, is the way I see it.
What a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, and so I don't know, and I get goosebumps and get really excited about this sort of thing too, because I think, you know, as humans, we all eat. And we all have some rituals or cultures and flavors around wherever we grew up. And for me, I have always loved having friends from all over the world so that I can have a little taste of what it was like for them growing up, maybe.
Yeah, that's very sweet. And I think, you know, when you travel and you get to see how people relate to food, everybody relates to food. It's this universal connector. And then, of course, when it can be cruelty-free food, well, then it's everything.
One of the things that I was so surprised about, because I really lived a very narrow food life until I became vegetarian when I was 18. And so then I was reading like Diet for a Small Planet, all the things that all of us read in the 80s probably. And, you know, I didn't really realize how much of the world's delicious food was just naturally vegetarian or vegan.
Yes. Well, because I think when you grow up in this culture where there's lots of European influences, a lot of French, if you're thinking about fine dining, everything seems so animal heavy. But then when you start looking around and seeing the world as a whole, and just all the interesting reasons, you know, some of the little bits of trivia that I've learned, that the faux meats started with Japanese Buddhist monks. You know, it wasn't something that just came up in the 20th century. And that Benjamin Franklin was vegetarian in his youth, and he introduced tofu to America. Well, evidently, he didn't do a great marketing job on that, because by the time I found it, I was having to dig it out of a pot full of water. But, you know, these things, there's some history to them. And then when we experience them too, it's like it's the first time. It's very cool.
I love that. I love looking at it that way for sure. For me, just, you know, because you usually hear, oh, you're poor, you're eating beans and rice, right? And beans and rice are magical. And Steve Sando from Rancho Gordo has helped us all remember it again in our time with a lot of the heirloom beans that he's been cultivating. And you don't need fancy heirloom beans to recreate a lot of things our ancestors ate and our farther neighbors eat today, you know, lentils. And what I love going into the Indian market, and I still will go and just stare, because I am, if I were in New York today, we would be going to all the grocery stores and all the co-ops so I could see what I can't get here that I could get there. So like, I will go all the places. But going into an Indian market, I just go and I look and I'm like, did I miss any beans? Is there something else I haven't seen before? But like having lentils that are whole with skin on, whole with skin off, split with skin on, and split with skin off. The first time I was
Yes.
like, what? I thought we only had split green peas, yes, split green peas and red lentils are the same way too, but like we just don't see all those beautiful beans.
No, I saw a post from Dan Buettner, the Blue Zones guy, the other day, and he said that when we think about taking lots of supplements so that we'll live longer, if you actually look at the people in the blue zones, they're hardly taking supplements at all. But he said they take these, and these little, they look like a lot of little black pills. Well, they're black beans. He says they eat beans, all kinds of beans, every day. And, superfood that doesn't cost a lot.
Right, and I love kind of experimenting with different beans. And like I said, I am definitely a food store tourist. So if there is, I love going to our local Hispanic market, which is called Campari Foods. And it's also, there is like super Campari Foods. So it's like a big giant store with actually a lot of other Hispanic businesses in it. But you can get all the chilies super cheap. And they have a lot of bulk beans, and I love the Mayacoba beans, which are like yellow canary beans, they're called sometimes too.
Okay.
And if you go on Amazon, they're ridiculously expensive. And I make a refried beans with it. And if you have an Instant Pot, on Plant-Based Instant Pot, I have that recipe. And so instead of making it a cumin heavy bean, it's more of like a Mexican oregano heavy bean. So it's a little different. But they're so creamy and so delicious. And the small red beans that I get to make my red beans and rice, like in the slow cooker, because you're not supposed to slow cook kidney beans from dry. And I don't think they have them up north, because I always have, my testers are like, well, what's the name of this small red bean? I'm like, literally on the bags it says small red beans.
Small red beans.
Because I'm queen of use a white bean. Well, what white bean? Pretty much any white bean will work, but this one's different. But you get to see all these different things, and like, pigeon peas. And in North Carolina, we grow field peas. And so, and you can get those at like the Raleigh Farmers Market, and freeze them up and just make some delicious homemade goodies. And
well, this all sounds so fun. And if you come to New York anytime soon, I would just love to go to these stores with you. I think that would be so much fun. And I am so sorry, but I have to give my little dog his medication.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to be moving on. I apologize. I could talk to you forever.
Don't apologize, because I thought we would end, but this was so good I just couldn't stop it. So hopefully we'll have to continue the conversation another day if you're interested.
I'd love it.
It's been lovely, and I so appreciate you coming on. And everybody, I'm so glad that you got to meet Victoria. Now you see why I think she's so lovely. It's just ridiculously apparent what a nice person you are, and I will look forward to talking to you soon.
I look forward to it too.
Okay,
all right. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Kathy, and everybody.
All right, have a great day,